So you can probably see there is a lot of overlap with these lawsuits, and that's because it impacts a lot of people and in several unique ways, but also because there's a lot of gray area with women's maternal health care, and these laws seem to want to try to lay it all out in black and white. The coverage we've done over the past couple of days, we've heard from politicians that passed the law and still defend it today. We shared the perspectives of Idaho doctors who are up against the abortion ban every day, or they just up and left because, well, it made their jobs virtually impossible. We also heard from patients who have to deal with deciding to go elsewhere to get the medical treatment they need because these laws restrict them from getting that treatment here. We listened to their emotional stories of heartbreak and hardship, all of which prompted a lot of response from you, which is what we expected, but we weren't able to share because of time constraints over the last couple of days. Well, today, we are making time. Nicole in Boise wants to know, why do the legislators who fight the hardest to protect unborn babies also fight the hardest to eliminate anything that protects babies and children after they are born? Brian in Boise thinks we should just keep the ball rolling and take away women's rights completely. They should be barefoot and pregnant, not working, he says, and they should be silent, so no more voting. It seems like that's what Republicans want. Or maybe we should just trust that doctors actually take their Hippocratic oaths seriously and just stay out of the decision-making process between a woman and her doctor, says Lori. Meanwhile, Daisy Ray Martin is glad she is past childbearing age, but I swear, if I were forced to endure all that the state of Idaho would subject me to, I would send all my medical bills to every politician who voted for this barbarism, starting with Raul Labrador. She wasn't the only one wishing our Attorney General was watching. I feel so horrible for the women that were brave enough to speak out. I hope that Raul Labrador was listening to these women, says Mary. Great reporting on the issues, says Kurt in Nampa. Once again, Labrador shows how out of touch with Idaho and who he really is. Jenny in Boise is grateful we shed light on the reality of Idaho's abortion ban, and huge respect for the women who told their stories to the world. May Raul Labrador and the Idaho legislature listen with open hearts and minds. Not everyone wanted to bash the politicians, though, at least not all of them. Shame on Republican leadership for using Megan Blanksma and then removing her from leadership after she took one for the team, said Rhonda. Appreciated the Megan Blanksma interview, said Tom. Her candidness was refreshing to hear. Interesting observation from her was that the health of the woman exception won't be passed in Idaho because the GOP is afraid it gives doctors the freedom to perform abortions. He asks, what about the overzealous prosecutors who are given the freedom to argue that death of the woman was not imminent, even though lifelong health consequences can or did occur? Doug in McCall wants to know if Blanksma and the crew consulted a maternity physician in crafting this bill, or did they just rely on their own medical expertise to craft a law dictating women's health care? Ken in Greenleaf wrote in to say, as an EMT for 10 years in a small Idaho county, I watched doctors make life-saving decisions. They never had to think about the legal ramifications of those decisions. I can't understand how any female representative could have voted for this bill. Are any of them medically trained? It's a shame politicians are in our doctors' offices, says Larry. What happened to the freedom of choice? Medical decisions should never be the responsibility of elected officials because they aren't living our lives. I'd like to thank the brave women who share their stories and let people know we need to vote when government steps too far, says Carolyn in Caldwell. Meanwhile, Steve says Idaho's GOP abortion law is a prime example of what happens when laws are made on the basis of religious leaders in state government and not on the basis of proven medical science procedures, usurping the rights of women and families to control their own bodies and future lives. Finally, PJ in Boise wrote, I hope we can regain control over women's health to the women and the medical professionals and out of the hands of politicians and religious leaders. Okay, so we did set a few of your questions aside, and Morgan Romero joins us now so we can try to answer them for you. But first, you spent a lot of time working on these stories that we shared over the couple of days, spent a lot of time with doctors, interviewing them and the patients. What do you take away from this?
Man, so much. Like you said earlier, I think we tried to pack as much as we could into 2 days, and this is such a nuanced issue, and everybody is entitled to their own opinions on this, right? So what we really set out to do, and I think what really stood out to me, is talking to the mothers that wanted these babies and hearing their stories about how they wanted to grow their families, they wanted to expand their families. They never in a million years thought something like this would happen to them. They never really thought about Idaho's abortion bans. And then when this did occur and they were told, hey, despite the fact that this pregnancy is threatening your health, that your baby has received a fatal fetal diagnosis, meaning it's got 10 different genetic conditions, or in Rebecca, who you heard from yesterday, and in her baby's case, it has triploidy, your baby is likely not going to survive.
Right.
And if you continue carrying this baby past the 17 weeks you're currently at, it'll threaten your health. When she learned that she couldn't get what she considers health care in the state of Idaho, it was really devastating for them. And I think just learning about all of the hoops that they had to jump through,
Sure.
how different states have different gestational limits. For Jelaine, for example, some states didn't allow past 20 weeks or 21 weeks. And so, I think hearing their personal stories really resonated with me.
It was revealing for me to hear from Representative Blanksma about how this process came about, and to point out as well that there were several Republicans who voted against this original bill because it didn't go far enough. So,
right. They wanted no exceptions at all.
No exceptions. All right, so we got a couple more questions that we want to get to from you about this. Okay, this one's from Deb. Why hasn't a woman's choice been brought to the general election? Let's let all Idahoans choose what's important in the life and health of each woman. We kind of touched on this yesterday, Morgan.
Yeah, we talked about it. And there is an active effort right now to get abortion access on the ballot, not this year, not next year, but in 2026. There's this coalition, this group of people that are working together to let Idaho voters decide what our laws should look like. They're a nonprofit now. They're called Idahoans United for Women and Families. They haven't filed their ballot language yet, but the group does expect to in the coming months. Ideally, they say this summer. Then they'll go around with a petition and start gathering signatures to get it on the ballot. They have to gather signatures equal to 6% of registered voters in 18 out of 25 legislative districts to get an issue on the ballot, Brian.
So their target is 2026. All right, Marty in Eagle wants to know, does any legislator have a medical degree? If so, shame on them. Listen to the doctors and stay out of the relationship between doctor and patient. So I looked into this, and yes, most of the people that are in the legislature right now, farmers, ranchers, business owners, a few attorneys kind of sprinkled in there. But currently there is right now a first, Dory Healy, Representative Dory Healy from Boise. She was voted in 2022. She has a nursing degree from Loyola University in Chicago, clinical nurse specialist, a master's degree in nursing education. So that is who is in there. But she wasn't around when these laws were being passed.
Right, because this was pre the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
Right.
This was years ago.
2022. So then Fred Wood, Representative Fred Wood, who's no longer in the legislature, he was in there at the time in 2020 when it passed. But it's worth pointing out, he was the doctor, got a Tulane University degree, went to the medical school of Tulane University, practiced in the Magic Valley since the 1970s, but he voted no against 1385, the trigger law. He voted no on the no public funds for abortion law. The 6-week heartbeat ban he was absent for, but he voted against the civil enforcement part of that bill. And in 2022, he voted against the House resolution encouraging the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, which they did several months later. So that would be the answer to that question.
Do you know if he didn't run again, or did he get voted out?
After being in there since 2006, he was like, I'm done. I'm time to step down after so many years. And so that's what he did in 2022. All right, Tom asked, what about overzealous prosecutors who are given the freedom to argue that death of the woman was not imminent, even though lifelong health consequences can or did occur? Something we touched on already.
That is doctors' fear,
Yep.
right? That is what this lawsuit that we covered from the Center for Reproductive Rights, that's what they're looking to do, is add the health of the mother into the language, because right now in the state of Idaho, the health of the mother is not covered under the total abortion ban or the 6-week ban, which is important to point out that these are overlapping. Now, the total abortion ban does supersede the 6-week ban, but they are both still on the books.
They are, yes.
They are both essentially in effect, and the total abortion ban says doctors can perform abortions to prevent the death of the pregnant person based on their good faith medical judgment and based on the facts known to them at the time, but essentially performing an abortion to prevent permanent injuries is a felony in Idaho unless a doctor determines they'll die without that abortion. Now, I looked into this. In January of 2023, the Idaho Supreme Court justices determined in a different lawsuit, Planned Parenthood's lawsuit against Idaho, that good faith is a subjective standard. The justices said the total ban leaves, quote, wide room for this clinical judgment. But Center for Reproductive Rights attorney Gail Dady says doctors are afraid, even when they believe a patient's complications are life-threatening, that their medical judgment will be second-guessed. Take a listen.
It is harder to second-guess a physician's decision-making under the good faith standard, but it's not impossible. It's still very possible that if someone is arrested for violating the total abortion ban, that a prosecutor could easily find another doctor to say this decision was made in bad faith. The doctor should have known this wasn't necessary.
And so in their lawsuit against the state, Dady argues physicians don't know whether the patient has to be hours or minutes away from dying to qualify under that good faith standard. We heard from your maternal fetal medicine specialist. We heard from the ones that I interviewed who left the state because they genuinely felt like they couldn't do their jobs. Because at what point do you say, yeah, my patient's going to die, without actually letting them die?
Dr. Duncan Harmon told us that he never knew the name of an attorney that represented the hospital. He consults them on a regular basis now. So.
I've seen some comments. I want to throw this out, and I know this isn't one that we're covering, but I've seen a lot of comments on the social media platform X, people saying, you know, these doctors should leave. If they want to do abortions, these MFMs, they should leave the state. When I was interviewing the maternal fetal medicine specialist, and I'm sure you as well, Brian, it's not a huge chunk of their job to perform these abortions. Now, induction of labor is, they said, it's kind of equal induction of labor in these surgical procedures, but it's not something that they're doing day in and day out. They're consulting people, and when you know, what they were expressing is when they don't have the option to have abortions or the induction of labor in their treatment plan, that's what makes their job difficult.
And of course, the clamping down on that, good luck finding an OBGYN for your daughter or your wife if it becomes a desert when it comes to that. All right, finally, Scott asked, all right, this is about the EMTALA case. If the Supreme Court decides against the state on EMTALA, how would you suppose our legislators would modify the law? It would make sense to change the verbiage from life to the health of the mother. Okay, so Gail Dady also said, this is kind of how we asked her this question. She said, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the United States and EMTALA, physicians will be able to provide abortion care in situations protected under EMTALA, like when a patient has an emergency medical condition. This kind of gives them cover to include the health. But what it does is it's only a subset of patients, as you said. It's only a subset of patients experiencing life or health-threatening pregnancy complications that would fall under this ruling. And she said Idaho's abortion bans to allow a true health exception would still be dangerous to be in Idaho and to be pregnant. So this, as even Dr. Harmon said, this is just a small section of what they do, as you just mentioned. And so EMTALA, waiting on that decision, is not really going to impact their lives too much.
Yeah, this idea of needing to terminate, or a woman choosing to terminate a pregnancy due to a fatal fetal diagnosis or threatening her health occurs long before, or it should occur long before they get to the point of her being in the emergency room.
It's just a ban. Okay, so you can find complete coverage of this issue on our website. Morgan, thank you very much for all you've done. Thank you for all your questions. Hope we could help you answer those. You can also find the entire episodes of the 208 that we've done on this the last couple of days. It's on our YouTube page.